Today we're going to talk about landscape design. So, the greener your bushes, the greener your grass, the greener your cash. Noelle, who do we have on today?
We have Joe Antine. He is with Joe Antine Landscape Design Contractors out of Richfield?
Yes.
Out of Richfield, New Jersey. And he has been in landscape design for what now, 50 years?
This year will be 50 years.
Woo!
Wow. Have there been any new bushes discovered in the last 15 years? Like 50 years, like
New
dinosaurs
bushes?
keep coming out of nowhere. Like
Well, I'm sure
find
they
a new
splice
dinosaur.
things together to make they can splice different plants
Well,
together
that's
and make a new
grafting.
plant.
Most of the times that's grafting. You know, there's thousands and thousands of plants, and that's what makes it exciting because all my arrangements are completely different.
So now you do hardscape design and softscape, do I call it? What do I call it?
Well, it's hardscape is laying out all the driveways, the walkways. We're stonemason, so we build the steps, the landings, the patios. We do a lot of fieldstone walls that look spectacular.
I love
Tennis
fieldstone.
courts, bocce ball courts, anything you can imagine.
Pickleball courts
You know,
now.
so,
Everyone's into pickleball.
I don't know what pickleball is.
It's like a form of tennis, but everyone's into it.
So tell us, so what is your advice to our listeners? What is the biggest bang for your buck? If you're doing a new house or if you're doing an old house, like what do you do? How do you get started? What should someone build? And then tell us about why landscape is important.
Okay, I mean, like I think it depends on your clients. Like if you're selling as a realtor, selling it to your customer, there are a small portion of customers that want to redo their own landscape and will hire their own landscape designer to fix their house. Most of the times they want the least amount of work. They want the house to look beautiful, and that's how you make it. You have to make the house. The majority of the people, they would want to have it where they just walk in the door and they don't have to do anything. A big thing is landscaping costs a lot of money. So sometimes the people get tricked. You know, they're looking at the inside of the house. And they say, oh, this is what I want. And they're not really paying attention to the outside. So what could it cost? A couple of thousand. And it could end up being 20, 250,000, 500,000. It could be any number. We've done jobs all the way up to $700,000, $800,000 jobs.
Wow.
For
So people
flowers?
Wow, the flowers are
Hardscape,
the
too.
smallest thing.
Hardscape.
Do you
Yeah,
do
it's
hardscape like
hardscape.
driveways, cobblestone
Yes.
walkways, and you said the
Yes.
fieldstone wall?
Patios.
Yeah, what we do is we basically take the survey of the person's property, blow it up into a bigger scale, draw everything in. Tennis courts, patios, landings, drainage work, we're big in drainage, sprinkler system. We have a master plan. And with that plan, we break it all down. People want to do their backyard first or their front yard first. So we break all the prices down, and that's how we do it. In 5 or 10 minutes, I know how the whole property should be laid out. Very good with artwork. So,
So can I do it in phases, or does someone have to
Yes.
come in and do all 700,000 at one shot?
No. You do it in phases, And actually, I tell the people, do it in phases because it's like a gift. If you get everything done in 1 year,
You don't
then you have
appreciate it.
nothing to look forward to. So when I design the people's properties, they have a budget. It could be $20,000, $5,000. It could be $200,000, whatever it is. We do the amount of work that's right within their budget. And naturally, it's like, the prettier you make it look, it's got to look very pretty, and it's got to function correctly, which is very important. Square patios are not good because you have a table, you have chairs, you're trying to cook, you have everything crammed in. Decks are no good in my case unless they're really up in the air, where you have no choice but to come out on the second floor. But your patios should have a cooking area, sitting area, an area to display your food. Those are your three basics, and traffic areas to get you to those three locations. So you basically organize the people in your backyard. Like your cooking area wants to be in eye contact with the area that you're sitting, because everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing.
So you said no squares, which I like because I'm not a big square person. I don't like
Totally a
decks. I don't
square
like
guy.
decks either. I'm more like I love stone. I love patios and all that. How do you determine, or how do you convince a homeowner like, hey, this deck sucks, get rid of it? Like, what's your tactics?
I actually tell them if the deck is too small. The only time you use a deck, like I said, if you're too close to the ground, you would never have a deck. If there's only 2 or 3 or 4 steps, coming out of your entranceway, you want to have a patio, and it opens you up to the whole yard. Like I was saying before, you have properties are square, houses are square, landscaping should be all curves and circles, and so like you have a 14 to 16 foot circle just to accommodate a 5x5 table with 8 chairs facing each other. So we have a round circle, square table, right? And then that leads you over to, on the short side of the backyard, coming out of the entranceway, is where we put your cooking area. So the cooking area, you want to be in eye contact, and you need so many square feet. So you need so many square feet to eat, so many square feet to cook, so many square feet to display your food, and you're basically leading the clients to where they have to go with traffic areas.
So you're basically saying that outside is just as important to plan as inside. So people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars planning their kitchens, figuring out where everything's going to go, but most people don't do that outside.
Well, that's the difference between the contractor that knows what he's doing and a guy that doesn't. You know, there's a wide span between a homeowner's job, contractor that doesn't know what he's doing, and the guy that knows what he's doing.
So what's your big wow factor? Like if I just bought, or if I'm ready to sell my house, what should I look at? What should I see, say, on my house and say, this is wrong, this is wrong? What improvements can I make that aren't going to cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars that'll help me get that better result to flip my house?
Well, you know, scale is very important. Driveways are very important. So, like, you have to, every house will sell at a higher rate with the proper landscaping, and that's the hardscape. Your hardscape is first. Your plantings are very last. Actually, it's the last thing that goes in.
See, it's not what I would look at. I would actually look at the plantings. But I do agree that Dave, my fiance, he looks at the hardscape. He looks at how the driveway is, what's going on with that. But I would completely overlook that and say, well, what kind of plantings do you have?
Because the money is in the hardscape.
The money's in the hardscape.
I think, right?
Yes, absolutely. The plantings are the least amount of work. Even with driveways, when you approach a driveway, when you approach the garages, your car should be square before it ends up into the garage. So you should, and then you should have a backup area. So from the garage to the side property, you should have minimum 40 feet each, and everything is in scale. So like when you go to ShopRite, your sleeve is 10 feet wide, 20 feet long. Mm-hmm. Well, in order to back out of that, you need another 20 feet, so that gives you 40 feet. So this is how I draw up the designs. You know, like you approach it, and you're able to back up, and you should also have a backup return. So if you have a 2-car garage, you want to come back 20 feet, back another 20 feet, over 20, so you can back your cars into that sleeve. You can use it as a parking spot and then pull out. So there's just driveways is very critical. Most contractors, they'll put the driveway right squared off with the corner because they get the house too close to the side property line.
That's how my last house was. We had nowhere to go. Once you put a car in, you couldn't back up. You couldn't do anything. There was no return area. It was horrible.
Exactly. So that's a big error by the architects. So the architects make a lot of mistakes. Drainage work is another story, but driveway is very critical. Walkways are very critical because walkways, you're creating focal points to the front door. And again, it should be a nice soft curve.
So let's talk about that. So again, to get a really a nice improvement for someone who's trying to sell their house, what should their front door look like? What should we have in the front? What are the wow factors that you could advise someone to add?
Okay, so with the plantings, you always want to soften the corners, and you want to create focal points for the front door. The front door is your focal point on a planting. You just step back in the street. You're looking at the house. You want to be zero right in on that front door, and you want to be able to get there. The first thing you do is pull up on the street. You look for the address, and you look for the walkway to get you from the street to the house. And so if you have a side walkway going to the driveway, that's a big problem. Because people park, they're trying to look where they have to walk to get to the front door. So they go all the way to the right, they go up the driveway, then they're too close to the house and they're not really viewing the house. It's like a painting. The further you go away, the nicer the presentation is to the house. So a front walkway is very critical.
Okay.
So you connect it to the street, you connect it to the driveway. The driveway is for the homeowners, to the street is to the guests to come into the house.
And there's so many houses that don't have front walkways.
True. I don't
You have a front walkway,
We
but
do.
your front walkway
It
isn't
goes-
attached to the front of your house. It's like attached to your driveway.
Exactly. It's attached to the driveway. When you say soften the corners, how do you soften a corner? What
Well, with
does that entail?
With plantings and planting beds. So when you have the walkway going to the street, you always go to the driveway side. So if you're facing the house
Mm-hmm.
and the driveway's on the right side, the front walkway bends to the driveway side out to the street and also connects to the driveway.
So
And
like a
with that-
Y.
Yeah, it's a Y, correct.
A Y.
So you turn around and that forms the planting bed going
Right.
from the front door to the driveway. And it also creates the focal point for the person pulling up to the house, viewing exactly where they have to walk. So they're getting out of the car and they're looking at the house like a picture.
So what?
And
So
right,
what
at
should
the
we?
right at the entranceway should have a very nice looking plantings, specimen plantings. Possibly with stonework. We put in big boulders.
So big lions.
I like boulders.
What about lions?
No, well, that's different. That's a more of a European thing. I don't know
Okay.
about lions.
So no, you're not doing lions
What
anymore?
about
no lions on the landscape?
Waterfalls and water structures. I'm a Pisces. I love water stuff. So what about fountains and things like that?
Well, most of the time, water features are done in the backyards,
Okay.
right? We put a lot of them in. You know, we do a lot of ponds, waterfalls, fountains. It's an eye catcher. So,
Yep.
and if it's close enough to the patio or multiple patios, you could enjoy it a lot nicer, the water flow. Some people get into fish. That's a lot of big maintenance thing. You know what I mean? But it's like a hobby. If you have
Yeah.
the time, you do it. If you don't, you just have the water.
And
running,
I don't
you
know if the ponds add value because a lot of people don't like that stuff. They don't like the maintenance.
I mean, it's just big.
I
Yeah.
know someone who has a koi pond,
Yeah.
and they have like huge koi. I think they're overfed.
They're not
but
sharks. Koi are supposed to be big.
They are.
Yeah, they're
Well,
like
they're
this big.
huge.
Well, they start and then they get big. But ponds have to be in the shade. You know, so if you're open to the sunlight, you're exposed to the bad algae, right? So the pond should really be tucked under trees, and it
didn't know
prevents
that.
the wrong algae from occurring.
So you wouldn't put a pond in the front yard. So you would do specimen plantings. Give us some ideas. What kind of plants should we do? Should we do dogwood? Should we do a Japanese maple? Like what's that big bang?
Okay, so the Japanese maple is highly used. Expensive plant, very nice as a focal point. It stays small enough. That would be one of the plants that you would use at your front walkway, leading you in. There is weeping blue atlas cedars. There's a lot of specimen plantings. Weeping Norway spruce. You have years ago we used to be able to do a copper, a graft between a cherry tree and I just lost my train of thought.
And that was to keep it smaller?
Yes.
Like a small cherry tree?
Yes. So they have dwarf species, and so two very key plants should be on both sides of the thing, and all your planting beds should be arced, or everything's in curves and circles. If you go to my website, you can see a lot of this stuff as well.
Tell us, what is your website? Because a lot of our viewers are going to want to see your examples and know how to
It's
reach out to you.
Go to Antine Landscape Design,
.com.
.com exactly.
Awesome. Awesome.
And these are all big factors. And I would say that as an investor, you would do the hardscape first.
Okay.
People always can put plantings in later. It's the very last thing that goes in. But now, if you're an investor and you're going to flip it, I would do the hardscape in the front and the plantings and leave the back alone, because the first thing you're doing is pulling up to the house and it's made up. So it's like going into a bar. You're going to go to a girl that's
Right.
all made up, right? That's what they say, right? You're not going to
think
go to a girl that looks like hell.
We always like the girls that are made up better.
Yeah.
So
So-
that actually is a great question that someone asked me to ask you, was about if they are a builder, what are those basics that they should do in order to get that house done? They built their new house. What are their basics? So you just said do the hardscape, do the softscape, because it just gives that picturesque flavor, which will help the house sell better. So you think that the builder could leave the backyard without doing anything?
Well, eventually the client is going to look at the back and see
Yeah.
what's up there, Functionality, people like patios, so you have a patio. Entranceways are very important as well, at back and front. So like the steps should be done out of stone. Landings, you need landings before the entranceway. Then you have steps. Patios are important because people like to entertain outside. Builders have a tendency of going with the cheaper contractor to just throw some plants in. And to me, you're better off without the plants and doing it correctly.
So that's a great question. So
We don't even deal with builders because they just want to do everything the cheapest way.
I have a house. I just moved a couple months ago, and I'm in a neighborhood where there's a lot of new, larger homes being built. So one of the homes that was just built, the builder, it was on a corner property on a main road. So the builder put in arborvitaes, and he spaced them out like 5 feet. He was trying to create a natural wall, but the plants are so tiny. He like built up this berm of dirt, stuck the plants in, and it just looks ridiculous. And I feel like they would have been better off having nothing there. Or they literally did it around the whole entire property. And then I was like, well, you would have been better off just doing it on the main road side, investing that same amount of money, getting like 6 or 7 foot tall arborvitaes instead of buying like these 3 foot tall arborvitaes. It just looks ridiculous.
Yes. You're absolutely right. When it comes to, that's called hedgerows. And I don't like hedgerows because it's just like a green fence. And if you can buy, and what happens is 3 or 4 or 5 years later, the plants are growing, 1 or 2 or 3 or die. It's like a missing tooth. You never can actually, so you can never, really match them. And there's so many different arborvitaes, and even having problems with the deer and everything else. But we don't really we never design hedgerows unless it's really absolutely necessary, like behind tennis courts or whatever, and you don't have the room and you're trying to create privacy. It does give you the best privacy, but I like to block out the things that you don't want to see when you're actually on your property. So if you put a big spruce to block out the neighbor's house, it's like softening the property. You block out your neighbor's houses and you soften up the corners. You create focal points to your front door. Backyards, if you want privacy, you block out any other things that you don't want to see, a neighbor's shed or another house, and you leave the open effect. Once you close things in, you're closing yourself in. You can get the beauty from other people's properties to complement your own backyard.
So block out the eyesores and leave the rest available to view.
Yes,
Right. And
with lower planting, so you get that open feeling. You know what I'm saying?
I have 2 questions for you. 2 things that have been burning on my mind. 1, what plantings do you do if you have a ton of deer and a ton of geese? So these are 2 animals
The answer is no planting. So just kidding.
who are plaguing my life, right? We have a pond, and then we have these geese that fly in, and they eat everything. And we have the deer that come in. They're beautiful, and it's Bambi, but they're eating everything. So what would you put?
Okay, so there are certain plants, most plants are eating up right now. And the arborvitaes, the green giant arborvitaes, that's a big plant. They're staying away from them. Boxwoods, any of the boxwoods, they stay away from ilex. So there are certain plants that maybe hollies you can get away with, and we do keep that in mind.
Okay.
So people who have fences, like if you have a pool in your backyard, you have to have a fence.
Around the pool, but not around the rest.
So to us, we like to have the fence around the whole property because you're closing yourself in, right? These are all little tricks. You know what I forgot to mention to you before about the plantings too is the flowering tree should be out in the lawn like dogwoods or cherries, and that softens the look also as well. So the plantings up against the house are called foundation plantings. You keep the low things underneath the windows. In the corners, you do the higher plantings, right, to soften it up. It's the knowing how to place the plants. You have to make the arrangement look full, but the prime time in that time is like a planting arrangement should last about 20 years, right? It lives a lot longer.
But
the
it looks
plants
like
live
crap.
a lot long.
Yeah.
But, they start getting overgrown. They start looking like us, when they get 70, 80 years old, you know what I mean? You're in
Time
your
to
prime.
cut them down.
Yeah. So if you, how I tell my clients, like, you replace the roof every 30 years, the driveways every 15 to 20 years, right? Your landscape layout should be around 20 years, and that's if they're pruned properly. If you don't prune them properly from year to year, you'll get 8 or 10 years because the plants really grow very quickly. So if you start your life at 30, say you buy your first house at 30, you're able to get 3 full arrangements. It's like putting a new dress on the girl every 20 years, 30 to 50, 50 to 70, and 70 to 90, and that's it. It's over. You know what I mean?
Now, what about if you're like, can you instead of having to go through the expense of putting through a whole new dress, could you like put different pieces on the dress?
Right.
Like, could
Add
I
a little
swap out a
lace.
couple plants here, swap out a couple plants here, or does it have to be all in one shot?
Well, I'm going to tell you how I think about that. So when the plants become overgrown after 20 years and you take out 1 or 2 and you put a new one in, you'll see it immediately. So it's like a 90-year-old man and a 20-year-old girl. We wish it works.
I mean, that is the trend today, right?
So that's how I tell the clients, you know,
Okay.
I get better off ripping it all out and get a whole new appreciation 20 years later. You know what I mean? And not that I'm looking for the work. I'm just telling it as is because it just doesn't look right. You know, you put a new plant in, you got an old plant, it's barren on the bottom, it's all out of whack. You know, it's like
It makes sense because I have side of my house. I have all these rhododendrons that are probably 40 years old, and they're like 9 feet tall. There's nothing on the bottom, and my wife and I were discussing should we take them out. And I'm like, they have to go because you can't fix anything like that. It just looks.
What kind of rhodo is native or a hybrid? Sorry, do they have a small
They're
leaf?
green leaves.
Right.
They're about that big.
Small leaf.
They
long?
live in the
have
ground, right?
Do they bloom every year?
I don't know. I've only been in the house since October, so they haven't bloomed for me yet.
Okay.
They're coming. The blooms are there. They're starting. They're about to come out.
See, okay, the flowering trees. This was my second question.
Okay.
So what I've noticed is because I was looking at these beautiful flowering trees, the pink and the dogwoods with the beautiful big and the magnolias, and I was like, oh my God, I want this, this, and this. I've been going to different nurseries and looking at different things. But they flower in the spring and it's beautiful for like 2 weeks. And then it's all over the ground, and then people drive on it and walk on it, and then it turns from pink to brown. And it's gross.
That's why you have a landscaper to blow it away.
Well, yeah, got that. That's the maintenance. Joe doesn't do maintenance. He does design. He's the creative behind the whole thing. But what do you suggest in lieu of those things? Is there anything that flowers longer? Is there anything that looks prettier longer? Because they're gorgeous, but then they're not.
The answer to the question is no. You get your 2 or 3 weeks, and that's it.
That's
you know what I mean? And most of the plants, even your annuals, small plantings on the ground, they'll last all summer.
Right.
That's a different scenario. Perennials also bloom pretty much a longer time than a flowering tree. But your flowering trees, they're there for the beauty. It's like, it's maintenance, drops the flowers.
Right.
And then you got to clean it up, which is what you said. And they are beautiful. I would stay away. Look, magnolia is a spectacular tree.
It's so pretty.
But it's one of the earliest plants that bloom. And if it gets hit with a frost, it wipes it out immediately. So you're really getting even less than 2 weeks. So you
Right.
can get a quick frost. So that, we don't use it because of that reason. Because people are not even oriented for spring until it's even after that bloom.
It's too late.
Right.
Yeah,
End
it's
of
too
June. You're like spring, end of
Exactly.
June. Right. Not
Exactly.
even. Right.
So, these are all critical things. Builders have a tendency of doing things the cheap way. And even with walkways, they do things straight. Even architects mess up a lot. It's just like not good,
That's why we need a landscape designer. So what would you not? What's like? Do not plant this. Warning.
Or do not do this.
Do not
right.
plant. Do not do this. Do not plant this. What's your top 2? Holy shit! Why did you do that? Or run.
You've just messed it all up.
Yeah. What is it?
Well, when you're saying a specific plant or you're
Anything.
saying...
Anything.
Hardscape, softscape.
All right, so
Plant.
let's do with the plantings.
Okay.
You always have to give the plants enough room. You never put them close to the foundation because it looks like it comes out of the wall.
Okay.
It's supposed to come out of the planting bed. So you give 3 or 4 feet is your first row of plantings.
So leave 3 to 4 feet between your house and the plant.
And the first plantings.
Okay.
And then you stagger them. Then you have other flowering plants in front. So you have your dark greens in the back, like a painting.
Right.
Your focal points, flowering shrubs, anything of interest in the front. Then you have low-growing plants to highlight those. So the more rows of plants you have, the nicer it looks, and especially when it's all in curves.
Okay.
You know, so
Now
it's the way you lay out the way that you lay out the plantings is very critical, and you have to allot for growth, and then those plants have to be pruned on a daily basis, and you never. Like I hate when a landscaper trims the shrubs with an electric hedge gear.
Okay. No,
So
no
that's
electric.
a big no.
No electric hedge gear, people.
That's a big no.
No easy way out.
See, to us, we hand prune.
So you want to be
plants.
like Mr. Miyagi, like from Karate Kid.
You want the plants to look very natural.
Okay.
And that's the beauty of the plant. They're not designed to look like a cue ball, where most landscapers, they just butcher the plants. You know, so we hand prune the plant, you make it look as natural as possible, and that's the correct way. You prune out all the dead wood, you restructure it. That's early spring, and then you're going to prune later in the summer.
Okay.
And what's the number one no-no for hardscaping?
Hardscape.
Number one, do not do this with hardscaping.
Hardscape is
Is it the harder the better or no?
no. You know,
That's not the answer?
You know what I like with, I'll give you an example with walls. All properties have different elevations.
Right.
Right? Nothing's perfectly flat. In fact, the only thing that goes up, the house goes up perfectly level, but landscaping is not level. And drainage work is very, very critical. So when you're doing a patio, that patio's got to be pitched away from the house. And it's the rule of thumb is 1 inch every 5 feet in the direction that you want the water to go. So a lot of landscapers lay it flat, then they're holding water. That water percolates through, goes into the basement. So it's very, very critical. When it comes to walls, we use real stone walls, field stone. A lot of guys use the keystone blocks. To me, we put them on commercial buildings, or we put them on walls that are facing the neighbor.
Got it.
And filling it in. So you don't want to be looking at a concrete block wall. People build them because they're easier to put in.
It's like Legos.
Yeah, so you just stack them up.
Yeah.
Where we hand chisel all the field stone, and we do magnificent stone walls. We're doing them today, actually. So, and with the stone walls, you can make nice soft curves. With the concrete blocks, everything's a little on the square side, you know. So
Sounds like I need to have you out to my house.
Yeah, and mine before the wedding. Before
There you
the
go.
wedding.
There you go.
But you said so when Noelle asked you before about the flowering or the whatever lasts longer. So back to my original statement was the greener the grass, the greener the bushes, the greener the cash, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like the only real thing that you can control all year long is your grass. You can keep your grass green if your grass is green, and then you have a nice kind of like wrapping for your property.
Not with my geese. The geese eat the grass.
Do they?
They do.
See, the lawn is, up to the maintenance guys, because we used to do that for the first 13 years that I was in business. Like I bought out 3 companies before I was 25, and I was doing 85 accounts, maintaining lawns and garden apartments and commercial buildings. You know, we were doing big on that. By 1987, we wiped all of that out because I was getting so big in landscape design. So,
So you had more. You had greener cash with landscaping design than you did
it's
with greener grass.
It's all more interesting work.
Okay.
Too. It's more
Sure,
exciting.
yeah.
Anybody
Right.
can cut a lawn, right?
Right.
I don't know about that. I don't think my 15-year-old could.
But the maintenance on the lawn is very critical. So, like, you should be applying fertilizer 4 times a year, lime twice a year, and reseeding twice a year. It's early spring, late spring.
Can
early
I seed
fall.
now? I need to seed. My landscaper's
now's
not
the right
seeding
time.
for me.
David's
Yeah.
been seeding since he could go outside.
Okay.
Like he's been seeding and seeding and seeding.
I
but
think
we
maybe that's
also-
why the geese are eating.
they're probably getting.
They're
the
eating your
seed.
seeds.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
You're actually feeding the ducks.
Well, we also had the septic put in, so we had to grow new grass.
Okay.
So the proper maintenance is very critical, because if you don't feed the dog, he's going to die. And
Yeah.
if you don't water, which is another
Yeah.
very big thing, 90% of the plant, the leaf plant, is water.
Okay.
So if you don't water on a regular basis, like throughout the spring and the fall, it may be 2 or 3 times a week. But during the summertime, you might want to do it every other day and never every day. Because
Why?
Because
Mildew.
no. What happens is when you water every day, the grass, the roots of the plant know that it's being fed that water every day. So if you let it dry out a little bit, the roots go deeper, which creates a better foundation for the lawn.
Should we do that with our kids too?
So basically, right, don't spoil them.
That's a good
Do
one.
not spoil your grass.
Or
Do
your
not
children.
spoil your grass.
So the fertilizer and the lime is very, very critical, just as important as fertilizer, because that neutralizes the acid in the soil.
What about weeds? Like, I have weeds, and it really bothers me.
You're probably better off going around with like a 1 or 2 gallon mix of weed Trimac.
Oh, the one that you just do like
and
this?
just squirt
Yeah.
the weed, because if you apply weed killer throughout the whole lawn, you could damage the whole lawn. And you're better off just squirting each individual.
That's
walk
something to give a
around.
kid to do.
know.
That's something that they might
When
find
you have
fun.
like a patch of weeds where it's just like a bunch of 4-leaf clovers.
Yeah.
You
Well,
can't
the other
squirt each-
option is to rip it out, get it down to the barren dirt, and then reseed it. Just rip it out.
Well, my lawn isn't that bad. It's just like 10% weeds.
Yeah. Well,
I want zero.
Weeds, like
I want zero weeds.
Yeah,
I'm a
individually.
zero weed guy.
Individually, you spray them, but if it's in big clumps, you're probably better off just ripping that right
Okay.
out, and then putting down a little bit of topsoil and seed
Okay.
fertilizer, lime,
Joe, I want to remind everyone where they can find you. Joe Antine. He is at antinelandscapedesign.com. And if you want to know more about things like this, please subscribe. Press that button. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Go find us. Because we bring experts, 50 years here and still going strong, that are going to help you with all of your investment and real estate and selling and buying and making that money.
Making that green. But
Making
I have
that
a
green.
really burning question. So, like,
Burning question.
I know there's some really bad words in life, like the F word and the S word and a bunch of other words. So, in landscaping, there's some bad words out there. So, like, one comes
Weeds?
to mind besides weeds, like is like bamboo, like the F word in landscaping.
Well, bamboo is very, very evasive, right? So it overtakes, and the root system is actually tremendous. Like when we have to rip it out, we literally have to go down like 2.5, 3 feet.
Wow.
So when we come in with the big excavators and the loaders, and we rip out all of the dirt, go down 3 feet, cart all of that stuff away, and then bring in all new dirt. Very invasive. But now you have some clients that have big properties, and they'll have it separating their neighbors, and they don't mind it because it gives them very good privacy. To me, I don't like it because it's, they flip over.
They flip over, like you could have like a whole clump of.
Yeah.
Does like a panda show up there or a koala? Is it a koala or a panda? Who eats bamboo?
The panda, I believe.
Somebody eats bamboo.
But you had a house that you were just flipping that you put bamboo in, or you
like 2
took
years
bamboo
ago,
out. Yeah.
We had a bamboo and we had not a bamboo, like a bamboo forest.
Right.
And I feel like there were special flies that used to hang out by the bamboo, and it was crazy.
Yeah, we've only done maybe 4 or 5 excavating jobs to rip out the bamboo. Very traumatic. I mean, little tiny weed,
Traumatic.
and it just keeps growing.
So, like, once
even
you-
after we rip out the 3
Yeah.
feet of dirt, it could still come back. Because all you have to do is leave a little piece of root, and it starts all over. Then the client has to, before it gets more invasive, they have to keep pulling it out years.
So you really have to think like, because once you go bamboo, you never go back.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
I'm leaving that all alone.
Anyway.
That was a good one.
So we try. But again, we wanted to thank you for being here
Thank
today.
you.
We look forward to having you back with more specific landscape questions. Remember, if you visualize it, you can own it. See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.